Good morning to everyone who is joining us. We're going to give it a few more minutes just before we get started. All right then, so good morning everyone and welcome to the webinar. We're just going to give it a few more moments while you all join the session, but we'll get started very soon. All right then, I'm delighted this morning to be welcoming the webinar Land and Grow Part 2, the China Agri-Tech Opportunity. And we're joined today by our members from 8 Hours Ahead and some of their key stakeholders based in China and also in the UK. So just a few housekeeping rules from me, and I'm Annabelle, your Membership and Events Manager at Agri-EPI Centre, and I'll be your host for today's session. So as attendees, you are all on mute, but you can say hello to us in the chat, let us know where you're listening from, and keep us updated with what you're thinking about the webinar so far. Questions will all be taken at the end, so please do submit them as we go, and we will take those at the end. So this is an Agri-EPI event and we're bringing our members to you 8 hours ahead, and we're delighted to start the session now. So in order to start the session and set the scene for today, I'm going to hand across to Ray Smith, Head of Agriculture, Food and Drink, the Department for International Trade at the British Embassy in China. Ray, over to you. Thank you. Hi, Ray, just handing over to you there.
Hello, everybody. Well, my computer dropped out just as we started that, so I'm hoping that we won't have any more problems. I'm the agriculture counsellor for the British Embassy in Beijing, and I run a team of 8 people looking at agriculture, food and drink. Our focus is on market access and supporting the UK to gain more market access and reduce some of the barriers to trade in China, as well as supporting commercial companies to make better business in China through helping them to find partners and helping through some of the stumbling blocks that you might come across on the way. Up until last year, we hadn't had that much interest from UK companies in ag tech. We had done some work on genetics, and we've got very good UK associations that we work with, like UK Tag. However, this year we've actually employed someone specifically as our head of ag tech. And their role for the first year is looking at what China is interested in and what the UK capabilities are, and trying to find some of the most useful synergies where we can support UK companies to realistically find good opportunities in China. So Mei Lin is our new head of Agritech. She's currently halfway through this 1-year research project, after which we will be fully fledged supporting agtech companies. At this point in time, we will support agtech companies, but we are still finding our way. But what I'd like to talk about today is some of the policies that China has put out recently, which point to a very promising future for UK agtech companies in China. So as you probably know, China is the largest producer of a huge number of arable products, grains, a lot of the vegetables, and the largest global producer of most meat products as well. China has a #1 document, policy document, that they produce every year. And for the last 17 years, the priority policy has always been agriculture. But that said, the focus has shifted somewhat. Whereas previously it was very much focused on yield, it is now much more focused on efficiency. And Minister Tang from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs gave a speech in February this year, and he prioritized seed genetics, arable land protection, and green agriculture as the kind of focal points for policies around agriculture moving forward. In addition, he very much talked about animal health, pest control, modernization of equipment, treatment of non-point source pollution, and cold chain and rural infrastructure, all of which are essential for increasing yield and efficiency and making China's agricultural system work a bit better. In particular, at the moment, only 70% of China's agriculture is mechanized. There are a lot of very small farms, as well as some absolutely huge farms. So there's opportunities on both sides, but the finances may not be there for the smaller farms. And this is one of the areas where we're trying to find where the sweet spot is for UK companies. China's agricultural ag tech is very cutting edge, and that's where the government's focus is. So things like sensors for information management, AI, robotics, precision farming, and biotech. And that covers both crops, livestock, and aquaculture. China already excels in some areas. In particular, you'll all know that they are absolutely brilliant at drone technology. There are lots of homegrown companies, such as Pinturto, who you're going to hear from in a minute, who are tech giants in their own right, who are now looking into the ag tech space. So there's a huge amount of investment going into this, and that creates some really good opportunities for partnership working. The government is also investing very heavily. They've opened 500 demonstration centres across China to look at ag tech, and they're investing in innovations, competitions, and the like. Some areas have got more promise than others, particularly in terms of commercialisation versus government-funded projects, which are less likely to be open to UK opportunities. Our team will be writing a report by the end of the year to try and support UK companies to understand a bit better about what some of these opportunities are. And we'll be working closely with the likes of 8 Hours Ahead and Agri-EPI to bring more UK companies out to China to find these opportunities and make the most of them. And I'll now pass you on to our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ray, for that. It was great to hear a headline overview of what's going on in China in terms of agri-tech. All right then, so now we are going to hear about the Chinese ag corporate perspective. And we're really, really delighted to be joined by Director of Corporate Affairs at Dualdoor, Don Tan, to provide this perspective. So Don, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you. Hi, Don, I'm just going to hand over to you now, if that's okay.
Yes, sorry, give me a moment. I am moving. For some reason, my PowerPoint is not appearing. Okay. Okay.
Great, we can see that. Thank you, Don.
Sorry, give me a moment. Okay. Sorry. Okay, I hope it's all working now.
That's perfect.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. I am Don from Pinturto, and I am delighted to be here today to share with you about modernizing the agri-food system with technology from Pinturto's perspective. So let me start by introducing Pinturto to you in a nutshell. Pinturto is China's largest agriculture platform. We serve over 800 million annual active buyers, or more than 1 in 2 Chinese consumers. We connect them directly with over 16 million farmers via our platform. In 2020, our gross merchandise value, or GMV, was about 185 billion pounds. Agricultural products contribute around 30 billion pounds, or 16% of our gross merchandise value. Our aim is to become the world's largest agriculture platform. We want to make groceries sourced from around the world available and affordable to all of our users. So Pinturto is a relatively young company. We were founded in 2015. At the time of our founding, the consensus was that China's online retail scene had settled into a two-horse race between the two incumbents. However, we saw the explosion of widespread and affordable mobile internet creating an opening for a better social commerce model. With mobile internet, consumers were using their smartphones to go online, anywhere, anytime, and in fact, almost all the time. They were communicating more frequently and entertaining themselves with their smartphones. We saw an opportunity to create a user experience that is fun, interactive, and social around mobile internet and the smartphone. In fact, we decided to be 100% mobile only, and we are the only platform in our class to be so, to optimize for them. There are two unique features of our user experience. First, we reintegrated the discovery-oriented offline shopping experience through a recommendation-focused interface. So unlike the conventional search-based platforms where users had to know what they were searching for and only showed products in that category, our platform is designed for users to scroll and discover new and different products in different categories. So as users browse, our application will refine the recommendations and provide a better shopping experience for them. Now, I would say that many online platforms have now moved towards this model that you see us doing, but in 2015, it was a pretty novel concept. Second, we developed an innovative team purchase shopping format called PIN, which means to shop together. With it, we make it very easy with the push of a few buttons to browse, explore, recommend, and purchase items with loved ones. This may now sound very simple, but it revolutionized online shopping. By making shopping social again, our users have more fun and are a lot more engaged. This stimulates demand. With users buying together, we aggregate demand for our merchants. With the economies of scale and greater planning efficiency, they can charge lower prices, so consumers come back with their loved ones for more. Our focus on meeting and anticipating our users' needs drives two virtuous cycles. On the left, you see that higher sales volumes allow sellers to lower prices and pass on more savings to users. As this happens across more products, users have a better experience and spread the word, and this further grows the user base and demand volume. And then on the right, as users interact more with us, we understand them better and can further refine our recommendations and improve their experience. In the long term, more savings and more fun means more engaged users. So, why is Pinturto interested in agriculture? Agriculture has been at the center of our growth strategy since day one. In fact, the first thing that Pinturto ever sold was the humble orange. Agriculture was what gave us our big break. Back in 2015, established online retail platforms in China did not offer agricultural produce. It was just not worth their hassle. Agricultural produce is non-standardized, offers low margins, and is perishable. China's farms are also quite fragmented. The agricultural sector is also deeply under-digitalized. In China, the online penetration of agriculture is below 8%. This is in comparison with a market average of 20%. I mean, the low online penetration for agriculture is the same across the world, not just in China. But we saw this for us as a great opportunity to do well and do good by digitalizing agriculture. For us, what we saw was a huge, virtually untapped market worth over 850 billion pounds. There was a lot of commercial value and fundamental social impact that we can create in this space. As we focus on the agricultural sector, we recognize the need to modernize agriculture and the agri-food system as a whole. The agricultural sector is under stress. Rural-urban migration has shrunken the agricultural workforce. Chemicals are overused in attempts to boost productivity and yield. Adding to that, consumers are demanding healthier and cleaner foods, and rightfully so. We cannot add more input to just ramp up production without causing further environmental problems. For us, the way forward would be for stakeholders like ourselves to apply and invest in technology to create more resilient and sustainable agri-food systems that will continue to benefit all for years to come. So Pinturto takes a system approach by investing and working with partners to apply technology solutions across the entire agri-food value chain with the aim of benefiting all stakeholders. So as you can see on the screen, let me highlight 7 initiatives spanning it, starting from the downstream, and then we can work our way up. So starting at the downstream, at distribution. First, we optimize the national distribution chain through streamlining. I will use this real example you see on the slide of garlic farmers in Henan. Traditionally, one of the said farmers sells his garlic to a wholesale buyer. The buyer, not the farmer, determines the price, which is about 2 renminbi per kilogram. The garlic then passes as many as 4 layers of distributors before reaching the retail outlet, where it is then sold at 16 renminbi per kilogram. This is a huge increase in price. So with Pinturto, what happens is that the said farmer then sets up an online store instead to sell directly to consumers across China. He decides on the price after comparing with other offerings, and in this instance, settles at 4 renminbi per kilogram. It is quite easy to compare on our site, on our platform, to see what the other prices are. So after deducting the incremental labor, packaging, delivery costs, the farmer will end up making about 260 RMB per kilogram. This is a significant 30% increase in income for farmers and 75% saving for consumers just per kilogram of garlic. And what happens with this is that both the farmer and the consumer will benefit. Second, we complemented our national distribution chain with Dualdoor Grocery. Dualdoor Grocery is a next-day self-pickup service that connects local farmers to local consumers. Consumers turn to buying groceries online in China during the COVID-19 pandemic. This caused some backlogs, so Dualdoor Grocery was our response to this. With Dualdoor Grocery, users actually order from a curated list of locally sourced groceries before 11 p.m. and pick up their purchases after 4 p.m. the next day at convenient collection points. By matching local demand and local supply and cutting out last mile delivery, we do two things. First, we cut costs significantly as last mile delivery represents 30% of delivery costs. Second, we widen the range of produce available. So with Dualdoor Grocery, consumers can now buy leafy greens and delicate fruit that Chinese consumers really like at affordable prices online. By fulfilling local demand with local supply and cutting wastage, we are also reducing the environmental footprint of the agri-food system. Third, at the midstream, we are working with our partners to build out an agri-focused infrastructure. Agriculture is big enough and unique enough to deserve its own agriculture system. Its own infrastructure system, We need an agri-focused cold chain logistics network that reduces food loss and waste, improves efficiency, and lowers costs. We have been investing in and working with partners to expand warehousing, sorting facilities, and route planning to optimally deliver a wide range of perishables that require refrigeration, particularly during the long and hot summer months. I am happy to note that we have filed patent applications for our cold chain logistics network system aimed at minimizing loss and quality degradation of agricultural products and other perishables in transport. Fourth, at the upstream, we partner farmers and agri-merchants to ensure that our platform and technology work for them. Through Totoro Academy, we provide training programs on e-commerce and store operations. We are particularly proud of having trained 100,000 new farmers. New farmers for us, they are young people from rural areas who had gone to cities to find work, but are now looking to return home. They know their hometowns, and they're also savvier about e-commerce and urban preferences. We build on their strengths, and we coach them to set up online stores to sell hometown produce. These farmers vitalize their communities, including by creating demand for ancillary services. We are heartened by what we have seen, and we are committed to training another 100,000 new farmers over the next 5 years. Fifth, we work closely with farmers to apply agtech. In April 2019, we launched Totoro Farm, a tripartite partnership between Pinturto, local governments, and agronomic research institutes. Under this program, farmers are organized into co-ops. Agronomic experts give advice, local officials track progress, and we provide training on retail as well as funding. An exemplary Dualdoor farm is the one in Yunnan. We provided initial funding to help set up the co-op. Agronomic experts from the Yunnan Academy of Agricultural Sciences helped select a citrus variety suitable for the high altitude climate and which bore fruit during the off-peak season for citrus. So in this way, it also plugged a gap in citrus availability and helped with marketability. The experts that we worked with also taught farmers to maximize yield, and we helped introduce an Israeli drip irrigation system to reduce manpower needs. We have seen the trees grown under this pilot provide better yield while using less fertilizer, less labor. These are real results, with farmers quite literally enjoying the fruit of their labor. 6, we partner farmers to embrace smart agriculture solutions. Last year, we organized our first smart agriculture competition. We partnered with China Agricultural University, FAO, and others for this event. We pitted AI teams and human grower teams against each other to grow strawberries. Eventually, AI teams produced almost thrice more strawberries than the human grower teams. 2 AI teams have since commercialized their ideas and are partnering traditional farmers to improve their yield. What is important about this competition for us is that we demonstrate that tech supports farmers, not sidelines them. We have just launched our second edition of this competition just earlier this week, inviting teams from around the world to grow tomatoes. We will be evaluating teams on yield, nutritional content, and environmental impact. We are happy that international agtech providers are working with us on this competition. 7th, we are also investing in the future of food and focusing on research partnerships to understand them better. We have announced 2 projects with the Singapore Institute of Food and Biotechnology Innovation, or SIFBI. The first, which started last year, aims to develop a more portable and lower cost test for contaminants such as pesticide residues. Upon commercialization, it would improve food safety and quality and encourage more environmentally friendly farming. This is important for us as an online agriculture retail platform because online agriculture retail decentralizes the supply chain, and this makes traditional health and safety protocols not so well adapted. The test that we create will make testing across the supply chain easy and affordable, and this will give our consumers greater peace of mind. The second, which we started this year, aims to quantify the impact of plant-based meats on human health. We are convinced that alternative proteins are a promising component of a more sustainable diet and want to invest in this space to help propel it forward. However, at the same time, we also want to invest in solutions which are also good for human health. This project will help us to better evaluate such solutions. We look forward to more international partnerships like that going forward. I think to conclude, Pinturto, as China's largest agriculture platform, is very serious about improving the agri-food system with technology to benefit all. We see the importance of international partnerships to do so. Now, I will be hopping off the call in a bit, but I am happy to continue the discussion and conversation with you via LinkedIn and email. I also invite you to stay updated about developments in this space in China on our website at the above link. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Don. That was absolutely fascinating and such great work across all the different sectors. So thank you very much for that presentation. We are now going to go across to Sam Priestman, who is Chinese agtech market specialist at 8 Hours Ahead, and he'll be talking about agriculture trends in China policy, tech, innovation, and opportunity. So over to you, Sam.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So good morning, everyone. I'm Sam Priestman. I'm managing partner at 8 Hours Ahead, speaking to you today from the megalopolis of Chongqing in southwest China. So very quickly, so at 8 Hours, we specialize in scaling growth stage technology in China. I'm very excited to share some insights today about one of the sectors that we have high hopes for and we see a vast potential in. So I think, oh, sorry, actually, like this, sorry. So I think we all recognize these sorts of images. China has come from, recently is evolving from an agrarian society and is somewhat a late mover. 42% of China's food is produced by smallholder farms still, and this poses a great problem, which is that they're unproductive, inefficient, and at risk to disease. Chinese ag tech at the moment is growing very fast, but this is not a total effect and it's not immediate. So there's still somewhat a lack of know-how, a lack of technology, and a lack of resources. At 8 Hours, we've distilled the main themes in China at the moment and what we really see potential in as these three main themes, which is food security, food safety, and biosecurity. In these past few years, as we all know, we've suffered and endured the great pandemic of COVID, but also we've suffered in agriculture from other diseases such as African swine fever. And this has really brought to our attention the urgency to solve these three main themes. So I prepared this diagram just to give a little insight and a little illustration of how we work with the government and how the government works to drive innovation and technology in the agricultural sector. So at the top right, the government works with capital markets and financial services. The government often releases or instructs financial stimulus to financial institutions such as banks. And those institutions are meant to fund upstream production. The real key here is food security, so the supply of food. I'll give you an illustration in a moment about the pig industry, and we can really see how this example sort of plays out. Over here, I've sort of highlighted these four sections really to illustrate really what are the fundamental goals of the government in looking at agricultural innovation. At the top left, this is the final goal, which is really generally improvement of society to, just like the UN sustainability goals, to alleviate poverty and hunger, but also to increase health, education, and welfare for the Chinese population. The market economy at the bottom left obviously is a fundamental part of China's plan, and to have stable pricing and to stabilize volatility is a real key feature. To illustrate this further, on the 20th of April, the Ministry of Science and Technology instructed a credit facility to the Agricultural Bank of China, which is no small sum, around £11 billion. And the purpose of this is to finance innovation and technology development in agriculture. Locally, I'm sure you all know that when we speak of government in China, a centralized economy is a very powerful piece of support. However, it's very fragmented. The government itself is 20-something departments at a ministerial level, and through the provinces, so from central government down to provincial level, down to city level, and then to district level. For instance, in Chongqing, where I'm speaking from, there are 63 departments alone. That's not to mention the government, the other government organs, the state-owned enterprises, and other quasi-governmental bodies. But down in Chongqing, I spoke to the vice chairman of Agricultural Bank of China in Chongqing, and he mentioned that even though they're very welcoming of this 100 billion RMB credit facility, they don't really know how to lend it out. They see lending to farms as ultra high risk. They don't necessarily have the designs for financial products to mitigate that risk yet. And actually, they still have 57.1 billion RMB still sitting on their balance sheets from last year. So taking that into account, we have many anecdotes of a similar nature. Our approach at 8 Hours is to look at the full value chain. So here we've just got a little illustration of how we view the value chain and the sorts of projects that we're working with. And we're starting from genetics. Ray Smith mentioned seed genetics. It's a very interesting area. We also work with the Animal Husbandry Bureau to look at animal sciences and genetics in breeding, especially. Our focus obviously from there is the upstream production, so farming, but then also it filters down to slaughterhouses, logistics, storage, food packaging, and then over to the likes of Don Tan with distribution, wholesale retail traditionally, but also e-commerce and things like the last mile delivery issue, as well as community stores, which we're very grateful for, especially during COVID. So we work with a variety of Chinese corporate partners, ranging from the big food groups, so some of the logos down there, so Wen's Food Group and New Hope Group. These are what Ray Smith mentioned as the very large agribusinesses. So I think Wen's, Wuyan, and New Hope each produce multiple billions, tens of billions of dollars of agricultural products. We also work with telecommunications companies, a big logistics provider, SF Express as well. And we've also recently come to understand the financial institutions and capital markets and how they approach the agricultural industry. So one very recent and interesting development was speaking to the Dalian Commodities Exchange, who are trying to design a new futures product, so lean hog futures, similar to the Chicago Commodities Exchange. But this poses a huge problem because it's the first time a Chinese commodities exchange is looking at a live animal as a commodity. So this poses a lot of logistical issues, not to mention how to price out insurance premiums, as well as designing financial products to support the transformation of a live bio asset into a tradable fixed asset. Also of mention is the financial institutions and the capital markets. I'm sure you all know, they are majority state-owned. So as the Chinese government supports capital markets, actually that is a way of controlling and stabilizing pricing within the market, which is the final outcome, final objective of stabilizing the market economy. So we're really, we have a call to action. Our ag-tech sector thesis is based around a wide range of core technologies. So starting with animal husbandry, this is a core industry that we or sub-sector that we are fond of. And this also yields a lot of other opportunities. For instance, just to name one, we're working with a Chinese company who designs neural networks to look at ultrasonography graphs to analyze and improve on the mortality rate of pigs. And actually on that note, I'd like to quickly take a dive into the pig industry. So I first started researching the Chinese pig farming markets back in 2011, when I was asked to raise capital, so 50 million euros for a Danish client. And it was a fascinating project of 100,000 heads of pig per year. I never thought I'd be researching pigs specifically, but it's an absolutely fascinating sector and one that is actually very, very large. So China consumes more than 50% of the world's pork supply. So to give you some numbers, back in 2018, that means 700 million pigs or 58 million metric tons of pork. In 2018, in the summer, African swine fever hit China, which triggered a price increase to 35 RMB and more. Actually, it raised up to 50 RMB per half kilo, which is the unit measure in China, which really values that total market of 2 trillion RMB per year in annual pork sales. So this is, even though it's a niche market, it's huge. Very interestingly, we found that profit per pig increased from 300 RMB to 3,000 RMB over that 1.5 year period. It's stabilized somewhat, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So, as I mentioned, in the summer of 2018, African swine fever hit China. In 2019 to 2020, there was a deficit of 60% in pork production, which is a huge number of pigs compared to that original 706 million heads. But also more interestingly, we saw a 70% deficit in the sow herd, which means those mother pigs could not produce for the subsequent growth cycles. We're only just recovering now. I just looked at the stats with a partner this morning, and the Statistics Bureau have announced that this year we're on track for 540 million heads of pig. So still there's a little bit of a deficit, but they've also increased the amount of imports. So back in 2012, around 5% of pork production was from global imports, so live pig imports. Right now, China is spending $1.3 billion per month on importing live pigs. So that's in total numbers is around 12% of China's current pork supply, which is far too high for a stable economy in the view of the Chinese government. Very interestingly as well, we found that looking at standards, so comparing these standards, so PSY or piglets per sow per year, or a production measure, in China it is rather lacking. So China now produces 19 piglets per sow per year, compared to USDA, that's which has 25, and looking at Denmark, which is probably tops the charts, at around 33. So there's a huge gap in terms of production. And this is for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons is mortality. So 30% of pigs, young pigs, are dying at a farrowing stage. And actually we actually have a very interesting client that's trying to solve that specifically. There's an issue of cot death. So sows rolling onto their piglets when they're very, very young. And that's partly because the industrialization of the pig industry is driving pig production to be, or increasing that PSY to very sort of high reaches and high numbers. But the sows can't necessarily cope with that. So as they have a huge litter, a lot of those young piglets die, which is very unfortunate. Another measure in terms of comparison is staff costs. I mentioned before, 42% of farms are smallholder. When you're smallholder, obviously you don't have the capital available to invest in staff or machinery or equipment or technology. So in comparison, staff costs are very, very high in China. This is a particular issue that the NDRC and the Agricultural Ministry are trying to solve right now. So I'd just like to share as well 8 points on objectives for the Chinese pig markets. So one is, of course, increasing productivity or yields. Lowering mortality rates is second. Lowering operational costs is third. Increasing profitability is fourth. So these first 4 objectives are about improving the welfare of farmers. So again, it's talking about, from a macro perspective, we're talking about food security for China. We're talking about supporting upstream production, so the farms themselves. Number 5 is a more of a macro issue, which is increasing biosecurity. Again, our second theme. African swine fever is not the only issue. We're talking about multiple diseases. And as we increase the size of an industrial scale farm, the risk of disease is exponential. So it's absolutely imperative that biosecurity is increased. Interestingly, the government, the Animal Husbandry Bureau, often supplies vets to check on the status of pig health. And actually they themselves, the human factor is a biosecurity risk. So number 6 is driving agricultural industrialization. So this is about efficiency, as Ray Smith mentioned. You can take that as a ratio of less people to larger farms. But if you have less people, then the government needs to drive support for non-vocational training to the rural population. So if you've got farmers without jobs, what are they going to do? And number 8 is China is now looking at its own breeding program to stabilize domestic pig production. And that's one very interesting project that we're deeply involved in. So apart from pigs, I'd also like to give a quick example, a case study, if you like, on the arable side. China has 125 million hectares of cultivated arable lands. And the next step is the digitalization or digital transformation of arable production. So we have been working with a client that is an agricultural IoT specialist. It's, as we see, this market, the ag tech market for this, especially for IoT, is worth quite a lot in itself. And there is a huge amount of government support specifically for precision agriculture and agricultural IoT, partly through laying down some modern agricultural industrial parks or zones, and there are 62 currently. So this, should I say, pioneer in agricultural IoT is actually a very old company, especially relative to Pinturto. So it was started in 1984. They are very scientist heavy. They have deployed in 86 countries and 50,000 stations, and they have a very well integrated distribution network. So coming over to China was fairly straightforward from 8House's point of view. They have a mature product, one that is essentially off the shelf, deployable. And we have, you'll be hearing from my co-founders, William Stormont and Jake Watkin, in a minute, and they'll be talking about how exactly we do this. But we have landed them and facilitated government grants for this specific company. And I think that is partly because China does like looking at off-the-shelf products, so to speak. This specific company has a fully comprehensive solution, but I think it's quite interesting to see exactly how their business model works. They have a holistic solution that helps farmers with their full growth cycle. They've integrated all sorts of telemetry devices, from weather stations to water management. They have 37 years of essentially AI training data for their disease models, which means it's validly the #1 industry choice around the world for crop growth. But also on the bottom right here, helping insurance measure. This is the next step in this company's growth, but also the next step in, I think, in China's agricultural development cycle, which is moving away from infrastructure to data. Insurance companies are often challenged in terms of human resources. So to be able to go and audit a farm and to really see if the numbers are true is quite an issue. So to be able to have automated insurance measures, automated data measures is incredibly helpful. So insurance companies right now, the ones that we're speaking to, are very interested in essentially acquiring this model data, this raw data, so that they can more accurately price their insurance premiums. And this incidentally and subsequently is supported by the government with financial support and other policy measures. So just to quickly go over the China market strategy for this company as an example for other companies coming to China, we've designed a business to government approach. This is not to say that you should really sort of jump into bed with the government from day one, but this is more about enabling governments as your partner or as their partner to access the markets. A centralized economy is very difficult to access, but once you do, there are vast opportunities. So that's the B2G approach. We as a team spend a lot of time meeting with the government and those various fragmented departments that need to be navigated. Obviously, there's a traditional B2B approach. There are some huge, coming back to Ray Smith's comment, there's a very wide spectrum of farms from the micro scale all the way to the very, very large scale. So for instance, New Hope Group is a huge agribusiness that we work with. The B2B approach is not necessarily all about agribusiness as well. There are also, as we've mentioned, insurance, but there are essentially data acquirers, and there are other peripheral businesses to access from landing their agricultural deployment. So just to give you an indication of how this company has set up in China, we went through a 9-month process. Actually, this was extended quite a lot further because of COVID. But the original plan was to in parallel, concurrently, to land and localize and do their customer acquisition. Because COVID hit during this plan, they spent a long time without any executives in China. So we picked up the slack and engaged a few customers, so 9 clients altogether, and have managed to build a $3 million sales pipeline without them actually being here, which is quite exciting. So I'm very happy to share all of this material with whoever wants to look at it. But in terms of time, I think I should pass off to the next speaker, my co-founder, William Stormont, and also Jake Watkin, to talk about this process in more detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. And as you just said, let's hand over to William and Jake to hear more about executing in China.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you, Sam, for handing off. So I'm here to do the dirty job of explaining how we actually do what we do in China. So how to execute in China itself. Now we've heard from both Ray and Sam, and obviously our friend Don at Pinturto, about the opportunities in the agricultural industry in China. And obviously there are a huge amount of them across multiple areas of the agricultural sector. To take that broader view of why are we talking about China, especially from a technology perspective and a venture capital perspective, obviously we know that the size of the Chinese market is incredibly significant. It is a huge opportunity, and as Sam has hinted at, with the centralized economy, if things are done the right way, there is the chance to grow very quickly. Obviously, we've heard from Ray and actually Sam that the focus on technology is increasing, and in agriculture, despite still 42% of the market being small farm holders, that transition to technology is obviously very strong and happening as we speak. In terms of capital, and particularly venture capital availability, there is a huge amount of capital now available in this space, which is an added incentive. And when it comes to things like IP, that industry is now changing, although we tend to hear different things potentially in our global media, as we'll hear later on. That part of the industry and that part of doing business in China is improving significantly. The one thing I like to always talk about when it comes to doing business in China, before I come to the challenges, is in terms of the World Bank's ranking of ease of doing business, China actually sits one above France and a couple above Israel and Switzerland. So it is a very viable market to do business in now. And obviously we are very bullish on the agriculture opportunity. But of course, there are challenges to doing business in China. There are many barriers that still exist. I think the one that first comes to mind when people begin to look at the market is the government. It's like this sort of nebulous entity, and as Sam has really hinted at, it's It's more governments rather than government, very defragmented. And it is, how do you understand that? How do you navigate that? And how do you successfully build relationships there that can benefit your company as you do business in China? Obviously, secondary to that is the actual strategy, how you're entering the market. Sometimes it can be plug and play, but often when entering international markets, and in particular in China, and in particular in a sector like agriculture, there are often significant changes that need to be made in terms of the business, your standard business model globally. That needs to be looked at and understood, trialed and tested before a concerted push into the market is made. Obviously, one of the major barriers to scaling in China is partnerships, and the ability across the board to find people that can drive sales, can integrate your technology, and finding those for the long term, so you can drive sustainable growth in China. That is the key difficulty, key barrier that needs to be overcome. And second to that, I think, as the sort of the two most important ones is, again, when it comes down to people. So your organization itself internally, and then the people that you bring on in China, how do you find them? How do you relate to them? How do you do business with them? How do you communicate with them, et cetera, et cetera. And then, as I hinted at on the last slide, again, another sort of nebulous area when it comes to IP. Essentially, you call this risk and reward. We call it IP, equity, and exit protection. How do you handle those kind of things? How do you structure correctly? Who to speak to about that, and how to do it with a long-term mindset as well. So those are the challenges, and that's what that 8 hours ahead we deal with on a daily basis, and have come up with our key offering, which is called China as a Service, which essentially is designed to smooth out that route to China, that roadmap to China, to enable companies to quickly move to a point at which they can drive commercial outcomes in China, with supportive partners with them along every step of that road. That is our key sort of raison d'etre at 8 hours. We are here to partner with international technology companies and to drive commercial outcomes. That's what incentivizes us. And actually, that's primarily how our own business model works. We are incentivized by delivering growth. So China as a Service, there are 5 key elements to it. Number 1 is market access. Number 2, government liaison. Number 3, talent and operational support. Number 4, IP, equity, and exit protection. And number 5, access to capital. And you can probably see that those, obviously, they mirror those challenges that we see when it comes to entering the market. So we have spent a lot of time trying to understand your standard journey when it comes to an international company trying to enter the market, and have very specifically developed China as a Service to meet the needs of international companies that are looking at doing work in China. The best way to really position how we all understand what we do is twofold. We are your execution partner in the market, and we are your guardian in the market. That is, I think, the best way to understand what we do. Now, really where our own process begins, and in particular in the ag-tech sector and agriculture sector, is it's understanding. It's understanding what is happening where, and where opportunities in particular lie. We are not interested in pushing technologies into China. We are all about the pull. So we spend a huge amount of time, as Sam has outlined, trying to understand what is going on in the market. And he highlighted the 3 key themes there of food security, food safety, and biosecurity. And here on screen, you can see a different way to look at this, farm to fork, the different areas of technology that are needed to solve China's particular transformational problems in this area. So we spend a huge amount of time trying to understand this, trying to understand what is happening when, what technologies are needed and being adopted by who, and trying to understand which key players in the market, like Pinturto and others, are interested in what particular areas of the industry. That is very important for us, because I said our sort of key motivation is to deliver commercial outcomes. So understanding exactly what is happening, and even underneath the skin of the industry is really very important to us. And that obviously also speaks to where it's happening. So it's impossible to say, you know, I've got the t-shirt, I've done that in China. It is too big for that. And you need to be able to obviously understand a few regions very well, whilst being nimble and able to reach into other industries. And obviously agriculture is one of the few industries which is pan-China, entirely pan-China. So you need to be flexible in that approach, but obviously there are a few heartland areas, and that is part of our obviously attempt to drive our demand-driven model, to understand where these opportunities are emerging. Now, really what this is all building to is the agtech ecosystem that we have developed. Obviously Sam has mentioned some of these partners already, and there are a host of others. But the key here is that we spend a lot of time speaking to these kind of companies to understand what their needs are and where there are opportunities for international companies. And obviously we get very close to the companies that we work with to enable their growth into China and to access those kind of opportunities. But the key thing here is not just, you know, here's an opportunity in China, you know, have fun. It's about really supporting their growth into the market, understanding what needs to change within their business model, who else needs to be at the table in terms of other stakeholders. Sam already mentioned the government, but it could be a third party. So whereas you have an international technology company and maybe a large commercial scale farm, there may still be a technology barrier there in terms of integration, for instance. So one of our key roles as 8 Hours is to understand what, you know, which stakeholders need to be at the table and in what shape and form, or what type of partner. And obviously that exists across, you know, those strategic partners exist across R&D, sales channels, you know, I mentioned technology support, and as Sam said, also in the supply chain, finance and other areas. But one of the key things, and this is particularly true in the Chinese market, is that in order to drive sustained growth into the future, I think it's really very important to have that stepping stone into the market. So pilot projects, demonstration projects, this is something that we've spent a huge amount of time developing. And obviously I think we'll hear later on from Agri-EPI themselves in terms of their own smart farm demonstration. But this is one thing, an area where we are well positioned to be able to help as well. And it just gives you that, that ability to onboard your technology into the market to prove its worth in China. And I should also say that some of these demonstration projects are frankly commercial scale, given the scale of the Chinese market, but it enables that then additional step to drive true scale in China. So it's definitely to be viewed as a stepping stone. And as I mentioned, there are particular opportunities that we have developed. And Sam has already talked about our interest in the pig and the pork industry. And we also have connections in the arable world. It's across southwest China in the Yangtze River Delta, and potentially also in Inner Mongolia as well. But these kind of things, I cannot overstate how important the ability to land and secure and access demonstration projects in this particular industry is. So that's the cut and thrust of market access. The government liaison tends to be, when we talk to international companies, it tends to be the thing that comes up first alongside concerns around IP and structuring. It is our strongest suit at 8 Hours, and I credit Sam and Jake and our other people in China for that. Given that Sam has already given quite a good explanation of the high level and how we approach working with government, is very much an enabler for us in China. And my additional co-founder Jake will be talking about how we operate further with government in China. I think I can leave this where it is for now, but I think the key statement is to view government as an enabler in China that can unlock unique opportunities. Now, talent and operational support. I think this is really where 8 Hours is doing something different and providing a unique service. People are key when it comes to expanding into China. That is both your own current employees at a top international level, but also in China itself. There's new people that you're onboarding. Identifying who within your current team can lead on that overseas project, whether they're going to China or not, it doesn't matter. Finding that key person internally is obviously key. There's a term in China called sea turtles, which is refers to international Chinese people, often educated abroad, who've worked abroad, who are returning to China. Those are the kind of people, when it comes to hiring internationally or for your growth in China, are the kind of people that you should be looking for. That's something that 8 Hours spend a lot of time with we have various partners in this area to try to identify and then onboard the key personnel that are needed for your Chinese operations to succeed. However, there's still often a gap, especially when it comes up, especially now with COVID and the inability to travel, but also in terms of time difference, communicating internationally, really onboarding that individual. There's still often a gap, and especially in the first few months of entering the market. And that is where 8 Hours, partner with companies, likes to take on a sort of interim general management role, in which we get very close to the company and essentially work hand in hand with them to ensure their market entry is a smooth process, before then stepping back as the company has then found its feet and can move on sustainably on its own. Another key thing when it comes to talent and the people that you're hiring is how do you hire them? What structures do you put in place? How are you enabling good governance, but also how are you building loyalty and incentivizing the growth outcomes that we all want from those hires in China? Interestingly, actually now, and I'm sure it's not the case for Pinturto, but a lot of Chinese people, especially millennials, are resistant to work for the big tech companies now in China, because they can sometimes be worked incredibly hard for not much return. So actually a lot of Chinese are now looking to be hired by international companies where they can do better for themselves. So there's a lot of talent that is available, and that is something that 8 Hours spent a lot of time trying to source and to bring in to companies. As I mentioned, the fourth part of our service, IP, equity, and exit protection. This is another one where I'm fortunate. I can dodge this one because we're fortunate to be joined by Peter Korn, who's a leading international clean tech and environmental lawyer, who can, I think, do a deep dive on this area. But it's, in terms of 8 Hours, this is something that we spend a huge amount of time looking at, and is one of the areas that obviously we like to coordinate with, but take off the table of our customers. But I'll leave this for Peter Korn to really dive into later on. And then lastly, when it comes to China as a service, that total service to enable companies' growth in China, we are driven by delivering commercial outcomes, but obviously capital is part of every growth story. So it is nearly always part of our work as well. And similarly to our ag-tech ecosystem, we have a pretty broad collection of potential capital partners, from venture capital to PE to government grants to debt financing. It's an area that we're quite strong in, and it's part of our day-to-day work. So it comes with that total umbrella of China as a service and executing in China. That's it from me in this session, but I'll hand off to Jake Watkin to go to a deeper level in terms of landing in China and operating with government.
I've gone all the way back to the start. So thank you, William. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thanks also, obviously, to Agri-EPI, FCO and Ray, Pinto, Don, and Peter speaking later from Dorsey. I noticed there's been a couple of questions from Christian in the Q&A there, and I thought I'd start with that. Do we work with the DIT? I think Britain, and this is predominantly a UK audience, we are really blessed in China with the network and ecosystem from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and DIT throughout China, from Beijing to Shanghai, where I'm sitting now, down to Guangzhou, and in the interior of Chongqing, where Sam sits. with the British Chamber of Commerce. I actually sit on the Technology and Innovation Board of Shanghai, to the China-Britain Business Council, which is really strong both onshore and offshore, London and partners, the list goes on. European friends are obviously often staggered by the level of support we get. But Christian, I'll answer your other questions as I go through my own presentation. I think an important point to make at the outset, for those of you who are techs, I know there are platforms and investors on board as well, but for techs, a key message is you cannot expect to just walk into China and sell product. You cannot just expect to walk into China and immediately make strong partnerships, sales, and you cannot expect to walk into China and achieve Chinese investment on day one. There needs to be a level of commitment, and I think it's important to highlight that at the outset. And what Chinese commercial partners, investors, and government need to see from people is commitment, and that commitment looks like, typically speaking, a registered company, a team on the ground, an office, some pilot and demonstration projects before achieving those sales, and then in turn raising the necessary capital to grow and scale nationwide. So my end of the presentation is a practical look at that. And whilst you can land anywhere in China, of course, and you will find many district governments, provincial governments throughout China clamoring for you to register in their neighborhoods, we find in this particular segment, for growth stage, early and growth stage technologies, our key sweet spot is typically Series A through D. The Yangtze River Delta is the place. So to the left of the screen, you'll see numerous mind-boggling statistics. I'm sure many of you have heard them before, from the population and market size, 255 million people in this area here. If you were, for example, to register your business in Hangzhou or Wuxi, the entire market is accessible within typically a 2-hour drive across fantastic, the most modern infrastructure in the world that frankly puts the United Kingdom to shame, rapid trains, etc., etc. So you can arguably have an office in Hangzhou, go to meetings in Wuxi for lunch and be back in your office by the evening. But the Yangtze River Delta, I would argue again, is one of the most important regions in China, as it has been anointed from the top down by the central government in Beijing as the #1 target for R&D, tech and innovation, and for the integration of foreign technologies into the domestic ecosystem. As far as tech goes, Shenzhen is also very famous in the Great Bay Area, another megacity cluster. But what we found, and we have mapped the entirety of China when it comes to that initial grant and government support, and Hangzhou in particular, but throughout the Yangtze River Delta, the grant and policy support available is the best. It is leading, and I'll come to what that looks like a little bit later. So typically what we recommend is that you land here in this region, you register your company here, you take a grant from typically a district government in this region. You use that grant to de-risk your market entry. This is the big scare factor often for your Series A, Series B plus on entering China. The CEOs typically know that China is their biggest market, that entering China is no longer a choice as it was 10 years ago. It is now an absolute necessity if you want to achieve global scale, global recognition, and global growth. It's about doing it the right way. So these grants are used for multiple reasons. One, to de-risk for board and shareholders who might be nervous about China market entry when you can see that entire market entry process is paid for. But also to hire your critical team. William talked a little bit about that earlier. You'd probably use that grants to hire a really competent bilingual country manager who's probably been educated overseas and has been steeped in your specific market for some time with a black book of contacts for getting deals done. You'd probably hire your product manager, your sales manager, and your administration staff and your junior translation staff using that grant. You'd also use the grant to build out pilot projects in order to prove in the market that your product does indeed work. What you'll often find that is that although you have a wonderful market and penetration offshore, our friends here will want to be able to kick the tires themselves and, for example, see a data set in China that is working. Another great thing about the Yangtze River Delta, of course, is the capital markets of Shanghai. So it's very difficult for growth stage technologies to get a good grant in Shanghai. The market's too advanced, it's too saturated, the land is too valuable, and the government is concentrating on bigger and better things, for example, Tesla, whereas the garden city of Hangzhou, about a 45-minute train ride, again, we are averaging grants of 4 million RMB, so typically £500,000. Those are equity-free grants, by the way. And Wuxi are a much better place to get settled in, get set up, but within easy access, 1 hour or so on the train of the capital markets. Again, you can see some of the key figures here. A third of the national innovation R&D stimulation budget of the whole country goes into the Yangtze River Delta. The Chinese government are pushing the Starboard, which is the equivalent of the AIM market in London, as the tech IPO factory. They're really pushing in this region the intellectual property framework, which I'm sure Peter will address again later, and taking IP protection very seriously. Outside of that, the key industries are Industry 4, digital, health and environment. And as this is an ag focused call, you may ask, so what's in it for us? Well, actually, what we're looking at in this region is the corporate headquarters and that financing from the government to get started, the sales center, the R&D center, the localization of your product, and the manufacturing as well. If you're going to do that before distributing, as was mentioned earlier, all over China for ag, we have an interior base in Chongqing and really deep relations with the market here. We have optionality in Beijing and Shenzhen and elsewhere through partnerships. It really is case by case about what is the right fit for you, what is the right ecosystem for you, and what are the right policies and subsidies available to you. So I'm going to give a case study of Hangzhou here. You've already seen this building. This is our 8 Hours China headquarters. This cube area, we have 5,000 square meters of innovation center in partnership with the Hangzhou government, specifically the Gongshu district government. We have a team of 5 that I'm leading. Several of them are on the call now, but that is doubling in size in the next few months as we're opening the innovation center in Wuxi and others throughout the Yangtze River Delta. Now you can see that you can get a category A, which is 5 million and above. In fact, there is no real maximum grant, but typically they go up to 15 million. But we don't like to get people excited about that, because if you're going to get above 5, they're typically reserved for unicorn tech companies, for international university spinouts that are PhD founded, and the PhDs are truly prepared to move to China and set up labs and become an IP factory with joint IP ownership. What we're looking at much more pragmatically is those high growth techs, again, typically series A to D, who want to land and commercialize. And typically we're looking at the B bracket, again, 40 million RMB over the last year and a half or so, with 11 case studies, so an average of 4. We wouldn't work with people that we would think would get a D, because you're probably too early. It's probably not in your interest. You should grow somewhat before coming back in. Really, the 3 million is the lowest we would hope to get, and with an offer that low in Hangzhou, we might look elsewhere for you to ensure you get the proper grant outcome that you need. So again, this office is within 2 hours drive on access of the 235 million people market. Hangzhou is a beautiful place to settle down. It's quiet. 20 million though still in the metropolitan area of Hangzhou. Hangzhou has 36 homegrown tech unicorns, which is more than most nations. So a fantastic domestic ecosystem within which to integrate, with particular strengths in digital, e-commerce and platforming, particularly for those farm to fork and SaaS technologies, looking for grand tech partners on the doorstep. And the great thing about China is you have SOEs, which are total behemoths that move very slowly. They can make for great partners, but the rapid growing tech companies are so open. A lot of them actually have international funding, NASDAQ listings, Silicon Valley VC or UK VC investment, and they're really eager to collaborate with incoming growth stage technologies with whom they can integrate with and grow together. So again, here's some interior photos. It's a fully modernized center, a very like center that we have in Wuxi too. This is government paid for. It isn't level 39 on Canary Wharf, but the office space is free. You will get free apartments along with this grant. If you do want to come and spend significant time, you will also get free international schooling for your children if you're going to go all in. But actually, that's not necessary. Typically, what we're looking for is a commitment of a minimum of 3 months a year cumulatively. But we must warn that it is labor intensive in the first year. And between a founder or CEO and senior management, it is important that we see 6 months plus between you all to make sure that you're there managing the proper setup. We as a team will manage the registration of your company, the banking, the legals, the licensing, the visas, all the stuff that trips foreigners up when they don't know what they're doing, so that you can focus on making sure you have the right cultural fit for your senior hires, that you're happy with them, to lead on the engagement with commercial and investment partners that we have identified, and to make sure that the localization of your tech is going well. As William said, we call it China as a service. We look after the rest, from the day-to-day management of government relationships, both high up in Beijing and the bureaus, or down to a lowly animal husbandry bureau in rural Chongqing, but to the operational relationships with the government on our side who issue the grants are very friendly. They have a team of 8 sitting right here, and we liaise with them every day. So what do you need to do? This is one of Christian's questions. What is the process? Think of it as pitching a typical venture capital company for your Series A or B, except with Chinese characteristics. So of course, we're going to want to see, the government is going to want to see a solid and robust parent company in the UK or elsewhere offshore. Founders with an exceptional, preferably, they do tend to lean into people with exceptional educational backgrounds. You don't have to have a PhD, but it will increase your score. MBAs are highly valued, or at the very least, having graduated from university. But they also, more importantly, want to see that you've got successful commercial track record, that your technology is unique and patentable. Part of what we do is make sure that there is indeed a gap in the market for your technology, or that the technology that you're bringing in will supersede anything in existence in China. And this is a really key part, because if you enter with a product or service that is already in the market and the Chinese are way ahead, you may find yourself disappointed and wasting your time. There's a reason that we are not in fintech, typically speaking, for example, because the Chinese are so far ahead in fintech. There are other reasons. There's a reason we're not in edtech. It's because of the regulatory hurdles. Foreigners aren't really allowed to get involved in curricula, etc. So we focus on those technologies that the Chinese government really wants, and agtech is a really critical part of that. So you don't need to go deep into business plans. We always help with that. We have many case studies of doing these and making sure you get the best possible grant outcome. You don't need a really deep financial model, more so highlight revenue projections, use of funds, etc., etc. It's fairly straightforward. In a rush, this could be done in a week. Of course, we would not advise that. A rush, we'd really like to see a month, but sometimes it can take 3 months. If you were to engage now and you said that you wanted to work with 8 hours to land in China, the next validation, as they're called in Hangzhou, will be in November, which gives a good few months to prepare, to engage, to perform mutual due diligence, to start with the China business plan, to identify corporate partners and investors, which all run somewhat in parallel, but at slightly different sequences, to ensure you get that best possible outcome. This I can take anyone through another time when we get in the nitty gritty, but this is the sort of process. 6 to 9 months was realistic, but with COVID, it might be extended for 12 months from outset to getting all of this road mapping, China market approaches, business plans done, through to the JV onshore, offshore structuring, the intellectual property protection, to licensing approvals, banking, governance, all of that, which we handle the vast majority of, to the actual go-to-market plan, culminating in what we call a China Series A capital raise. Again, we would typically only do that once you've landed, registered, built a small team, and at least committed a pilot. This is what Chinese investors need to see. You must not expect to be financed on day one. More simply, this is what the parallel structures look like. There's a market entry process, 3 or 4 months, talking about the early engagement and planning. Then we start engaging commercial partners at the same time as we go through the validation process with the government. The commercial partners love the endorsement of a government. It shows that the government have performed proper due diligence on you, that they have seen that you're totally dedicated and committed to entering and growing in the Chinese market. And it gives commercial and indeed investment partners that comfort and satisfaction, while simultaneously the government like to see that you've proven your market. So from the planning stage, we very quickly go into these parallel processes as somewhat elegant plate spinning, if you will, to make sure you've got the endorsement from the investment side of the government and commercialization. And in the relatively short term, this is what we would say for a growth stage technology. If you're pre-IPO or unicorn, this would be different. But for your Series A to Ds, for circa £1 million worth in RMB equivalent in sales in the first 18 months or so, and then very quickly scaling after that Series A to 5 or so million, with an investment outcome, typically a China Series A of about £1 million after a year to beef out and grow, and a later Series B, if necessary, to go national at 40. And then at the same time, engaging with multiple strategic partners, not just commercial partners, but those that might have an interest outside of that, with asset commitment or self-financing, and the grant support, which is critical, but not absolutely necessary. And you don't have to work with the government if you don't want to. But as I've said, it's a huge endorsement, and the commercial and investment partners like it. And after landing, teething a couple of years in this region of an easily manageable market, then after probably taking at least your China Series A, looking to scale out into the interior, south and north, opening more offices, and of course, getting your product into the market. So that's it from me. Myself and all of my colleagues, both William and Sam, who've been speaking, and the others who are on the phone, look forward to engaging. Our email addresses are at the bottom there. Please do get in touch.
Great, thank you so much, Jake. So now we're going to move across to hear from Peter Korn, who is partner and head of Shanghai, Dorsey and Whitney, and he will be discussing the key governance for China IP, equity and exit protection. Remember to keep those questions coming in as well.
Great, thank you very much. Here, I'm just bringing my presentation up onto the screen. Very great to meet you all. Thanks very much to 8 Hours and the other organizers for allowing me to present today. 8 Hours has been great to work with, and I fully endorse all of their very incisive and very well informed comments today by the team. Congratulate you. I do have a little bit of experience to share, having been a foreign lawyer here in Shanghai for the last 25 years. I'm very proud to be able to address you from the benefit of experience. So today, I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes sharing with you some key lessons about IP protection, equity, and exit protection. So I want to just set the scene first. because I want to refer back to an actual project that I've been doing along the way in order to illustrate the general points that I'm going to make. And this particular scene involves a biofertilizer company, which creates biofertilizer from the cultivation of algae and mixing it with biochar. So the big attraction of that is, of course, that it replaces chemical fertilizer, which is harmful to the environment, has the same efficacy. In the process, the algae and the fertilizer itself absorbs massive amounts of carbon. And one shouldn't ignore that in the context of agri-tech opportunities, because everybody may recall that President Xi made a big commitment to the COP about China's reduction of its carbon emissions. So local governments around the country are currently busy trying to draw up plans as to how to do that. So if your agri-tech technology can double up and contribute towards the reduction of carbon, well, double points to you. So here are some key questions that I want you to bear in mind as I'm giving this presentation. I don't need to answer all of these today. I'll answer some of them in the context of the presentation, but these are questions that you have to bear in mind, and you have to cover them all off when you're planning how to execute your China strategy. My good friends at 8 Hours will help you cover off these questions, but to give an illustration back to the biofertilizer project, where does China fit into your worldwide strategy? That's, you know, a very unique choice to your organization. But in the case of the biofertilizer company, they saw China as an enabler. They didn't have big revenue anywhere else yet because they didn't feel that they'd actually been proven at a scale that would enable them to go worldwide. So they're looking towards China as that key enabling market, which would allow them to raise the capital and have the kilometers on the board to demonstrate their scalable biofertilizer solution works. So they are realistic about China and look at it more as a midterm play. So they would use it to demonstrate the efficacy of their solution, raise money, then over the long term, hand over the management of the Chinese market to their partners, and then focus themselves on the rest of the world. So every strategy globally is different. Everybody wants to use China in a different way, but that was their strategy. And I encourage you to figure out where China fits into your global strategy. Now, these other points I'm going to address in the context of my presentation. As my friends at 8 Hours have mentioned, China's a great place to scale up, not necessarily for foreign companies at the innovation stage, but definitely at the growth stage. And I've done a quick comparison here with various other places in the world just to illustrate that. And China comes out on top in growth, even on top of the USA. So in that respect, it has key ecosystems, which 8 Hours has already set out for you. It has the funders who are already there, who look at whether you get government support and whether you've proven your technology. And it has exit routes, a multiplicity of exit routes that you can explore. So how about the big elephant in the room, IP protection? The one that's left for the lawyers to answer. Well, IP protection in China has come a long, long way, as Jake mentioned. You know, in the old days, well, China always had IP laws on the books, but the enforcement mechanism left a lot to be desired, and there weren't specialist courts and judges who could deal and understand fully IP infringement cases. Now, these days, it's a completely different situation. China's IP laws are world-class. They've been upgraded over time. They're all in compliance with international conventions. They have brought in things that are really critical in IP enforcement regimes over the last several years, such as the concept of injunction, which means identifying your infringing the infringing counterpart, and then getting a court to order that counterpart to stop producing the infringing product. And foreigners have a great record in IP courts in suing infringers. So never think for a moment that you don't have tools at your disposal. The problem is there's been so much negativity about China and about a phenomenon which I call looking at the present through a rear vision mirror, that the bad stories tend to influence incoming companies, or companies that decide not to come to China because they've heard the bad stories, because they've based out of experiences of other companies that have occurred 10 or 20 years ago. Now, there are a lot of things that you can do to protect your IP. China still has IP issues. So unless you protect your IP, people will take advantage of it. So you've got to assess the strengths and weaknesses of each of your IP assets vis-a-vis competitors. You've got to understand where your areas of strength are, areas of weakness are, and then create a strategy around each of those areas. And that means, it doesn't mean, for example, filing everything as a patent, because as everybody knows, patents are on the record. They're protected, but they're protected for a certain period of time. In the case of China, it's 20 years. And because they're on the open record, they're capable of being reverse engineered. Now, of course, you can protect yourself against, reverse engineering through patent lawsuit, but why not protect yourself better? Why not decide what you're going to keep confidential as know-how and only patent part of your solution? So it's that sort of strategic thinking which would make it much harder for would-be infringers to be able to copy your entire solution. And partnering is very important too. It's very rare that one company has the whole solution that it uses. It's normally a combination of different intellectual property. So that means that it's very prudent to partner with other companies, to cross-license with other companies, to integrate your technology with other companies. So you have a combination of patents, you have a combination of know-how, which is not disclosed to the outside world, and cross-licensing, which would incorporate all the different solutions into your one integrated solution. So that means that copying just one part will not work. Would-be infringers would need to copy the whole set, which would basically be inaccessible. Now, when you get out of pure intellectual property protection, you can get into strategic strategic commercial ways of protecting your intellectual property. An example of doing that is if you need the support of subcontractors to make certain parts of your product that you're manufacturing in China, don't show each of those subcontractors your entire technology solution. Just limit what they see to what they need to see. And have a multiplicity of these different subcontractors all making different parts. That way, they'll all need you. They'll all be your strong partner. They'll all help you watch out what the other subcontractors are doing, and you'll protect yourself against infringement. I mean, one of the worst things you could possibly do is have a joint venture with a partner that's trying to, or has already got a record of trying to do exactly the same things you're trying to do in China. You know, no matter how strong your non-compete clause may be in that joint venture agreement, it still doesn't cut off the temptation to actually benefit from exposure to technology. These are all fairly basic, very common sense things, and you're surprised how few companies really think these things through. And the last thing is keep ahead of your competitors. Once you're set up in China, through innovation facilities such as what Jake has described, you invest in indigenizing or making local your own technology solution through improvements in R&D centers. The Chinese government loves that. They love to see you creating new R&D, foreground R&D that complements the background R&D that you use to build the system. And this tailors the solution to China, and it means that your entities in China hold patents, which again create more kudos with the government. So that being said, don't make all these fundamental mistakes that have been made so many times before, failing to use employee invention agreements. That's very, very important inside the organization. Assuming a company that you've engaged to do some contracting work does not own your work product that you get them to do. That's not the case. You have to have a properly documented agreement to ensure that you still own that work product. Also, just blindly using another company's license agreement without reviewing it and making sure that your intellectual property and your know-how is properly protected. And neglecting to identify and protect trade secrets. You have to do certain things in order to protect your trade secrets. There may be certain basic things, such as having a security system, documentation in which the secrets are all clearly marked as confidential. But again, a lot of companies have been very slack in this regard and haven't taken the necessary steps. And of course, the last big one, giving the family jewels to a supplier. Well, I trusted them. I never thought that they'd do that. So all of these different partners you need in your ecosystem in order to be successful in China. And 8 Hours has already demonstrated that it's well on top of all of these different groups of partnerships, but they all need to be in place at some stage of the cycle for your company to make it a success. Now let's get into entry strategies now, and I'll refer back to my biofertilizer example in a minute. Well, the entry stage would normally involve you forming an offshore holding company. It would be best to have an offshore holding company that's a special purpose vehicle. I know 8 Hours encourages its customers to establish such vehicles in Hong Kong and in Singapore. They're not the only choices, but they're good choices.
Peter, I'm sorry
yeah.
to interrupt. We've just got 20 minutes left, and we also need to hear from Shamal on the smartphone. So we just ask you just to another minute just to finish up your presentation. I do apologize, but this presentation will be available afterwards.
Yeah, I'll give the presentation to everybody afterwards, and you can ask questions. But I'll go through this very quickly. Entry strategy stage would be having the WFOE established under the holdco with certain pilot projects with pilot partners. That was done in this biofertilizer project, okay, with certain pilot projects demonstrating the cultivation of algae and of the deployment of the biofertilizer to absorb carbon dioxide. The second stage, the deployment stage, would be again setting up that ecosystem with subcontractors, as I've mentioned, setting up the WFI or a JV if necessary, together with an R&D center. I highlighted the black box, which is the black box of the most advanced part of your technology, of the background technology, which you'd hold offshore. The right-hand side, which is rare in the agri-tech industry for foreigners, in case it's a certain type of technology that's prohibited to deploy in China, in which case you'd have a VIE structure. I can answer questions about that offline. Entry strategy C would be where you expand around China. You'd have different projects around China deploying the technology. You may have a different vehicle for such deployment. It may be with different partners in each locality, in which case you have JVs, and you may have set up a management company in which to provide integrated services to all of these different vehicles with a separate R&D center. Now, with the exit strategy, you have many choices. You can list the offshore vehicle, have an offshore share sale, maybe even consider convertible bonds. Onshore, there's quite a number of different options. You've got the second board in Shenzhen, which is set up for technology companies to list. You've got the third board, which is for smaller companies, which does lack liquidity, but it's still an option. And you've got the onshore share sale of the offshore holdco shares to a domestic Chinese partner, which should be able to convert that renminbi payment into foreign exchange to remit to you offshore as the shareholder. So the key message here is to structure for an exit with a time frame in mind. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry to rush you there. So we're going to go across to our Chief Technical Officer at Agri-EPI Centre, Shamal Mohammed, to give an overview of our Smart Farm initiative in China. And Shamal, I appreciate you do have to jump off, so if you want to speed through this, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shamal Mohammed, Chief Technical Officer at Agri-EPI Centre. I'm sure you probably heard about our activity in the past. We have a few engagement and partnership. I'm just giving you an overview, and then I'm really sorry I have to jump off as quick as possible. But if you have any questions or any inquiries, you can communicate with my colleagues from Agri-EPI, and we will try to come back to you as soon as possible. So our partnership started with China as part of the joint strategy for science and technology and innovation, which is a collaboration between the Chinese and the UK government. And as part of that strategic collaboration, agriculture technology was one of the flagship challenges, and Agri-EPI is leading this challenge, which is mainly focused on productivity, innovation, trade, as well as the resilience, the sustainability of the farm, and also the improving the environment. So we worked with a number of partners in China, and we obviously have funding from Innovate UK to start implementing the smart farm as a concept with Chinese partners. So we started the first phase of smart farm in 2019, and we completed in July 2019. As part of that project, we worked with a number of UK companies like Soil Essential, RDS, University of Strathclyde, and James Hutton. In China, we were working with NERCITA, which is Agriculture Engineering Research Organization, and we tried to pick up some of the challenges and deploy technologies and working with Chinese partners to better understand the value of this technology to improve productivity, but in the same time to increase environmental footprint of agriculture. So As part of our collaboration, so we selected few technologies in collaboration with our partners. So Soil Essential provided the data platform for monitoring and collecting farm data, RDS demonstrating the yield monitor and yield map, and also Strathclyde using the Earth rover, which is mostly used in on-site soil analysis, soil assessment. So this is just an example of looking at the crop development using satellite imagery in collaboration with Soil Essential, a UK company, and our colleagues in Nersita, so we can pick up the areas with lower productivity, understanding that the problems, deploying the rover to do some soil analysis, applying right fertilizer and nutrient in order to improve productivity. But I think one of the important lesson was, working very closely with the partners is the key, and having that communication channel, understanding some of the challenges, for example, the technology built and developed in the UK, bringing the same technology and trying to deploy in China, it require a lot of work and understanding and some of the limitations. So this is, again, at the Earth rover, which doing a soil analysis in real time and helping understanding the soil nitrogen availability in the field. We also demonstrated the role of robotics in the greenhouses, especially in picking up tomatoes. And that was another part of the project, which is all around how making the farms and the operation more smarter using technologies and sensors. Obviously, these not been done without an international team, as I said, working with engineers, but also the management, as well as the partners and researchers in China, visiting there, understanding some of the challenges on the ground, and trying to address these challenges as part of the project. So that was the first phase of the Smart Farm project and collaboration, if you like. The second phase, which we call the Smart Farm 1.5, was more focused on the livestock sector and working with commercial partners like Tianjin Food Group, which we signed a memorandum of understanding. And as part of this project, we bring 3 UK companies, RoboScientific, which using the air samplers to detect disease in pigs, using the technologies and sensors from GreenGauge to understand the environmental as well as the animal behavior. Innovent have a 3D cameras to understand the postures and the behavior of the pig. So the whole purpose of this project, we're trying to bring a multiple technology to detect disease in pig industry in the early stages in order to minimize the animal welfare as well as the cost to the production of the Tianjin Food Group. So RoboScientific, they already have a technology using the analyzing volatile to detect disease. So for example, here they use the same sort of technology in poultry and chicken to detect influenza, for example. So we bring in the same sort of a technology for the first time in the pig sector to understand some of the challenges and some of the diseases facing the pig sector in China. Innovent 3D cameras is looking at the movement and the posture of the pig. So the idea is to understand if you have a healthy pig, have a different sort of a posture and movement in the pen, while the sick one have obviously a different sort of a movement in the pen as well. So we're building that sort of algorithm to apply in a more commercial way, if you like. And also with Innovent, they have a multiple sensors we are deploying into a 2 sort of trial, if you like. So we are separating a healthy pig and the unhealthy one, infected pig in a different environment, and deploying this technology by collecting all these data. We trying to build that sort of an integrated disease and animal welfare system. So the Tianjin Food Group is kind of predicting some of these diseases at a very early stages and manage them, before become too spread across the operation and across the farm as well. So this is how Agri-EPI works in China. We are almost like this triangle. We are gluing the UK technology, working with the Chinese partners to demonstrate the value of these technologies in Chinese environment and in Chinese market, in order to open up a business opportunity for UK agri-tech sector and helping them to grow their businesses in China. So that's what we do at the moment. So we are in a almost final phase of the work with Tianjin Food Group, but we are in a discussion to start the second phase of Smart Farm, because this is part of a 4-phase. Obviously, everything is dependent on funding and the engagement from both Chinese and the UK government. But that's just a quick overview of what we do in China. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact my colleagues from Agri-EPI. And thanks to all the speakers. It was really fantastic, listening and understanding some of the challenges facing the companies trying to explore Chinese market. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shamal. That was really, really useful. I appreciate you staying on as well when you've got to other commitments. So thank you very much. So yeah, that concludes all of our presentations today. I think there's a very, very strong case that you should be looking at landing and growing in China. There's lots of opportunities for agri-tech companies, and obviously we do have the great contact with 8 Hours Ahead to help you to get out into China and support you with that process. So now we are going to go across to some questions. So if we can ask all the panelists to bring their video back on, please. We've got a few minutes for some questions. There we go. So my first question, I want to direct this to 8 Hours Ahead, is so what kind of resources do you need to dedicate to actually starting the process of looking at China as a market?
I can jump in with that one, Annabelle. Thank you. As I've said, China, generally speaking, unless it's a PhD group of PhDs who are literally going to move and bring their R&D, they're not that interested in seed stage technology. The government, commercial partners, and investors would rather engage with immediately deployable technology. We tend to only work with Series A+, typically A to D, unless in exceptional circumstances. You should preferably have blue chip recognizable investors. Government grants from your home countries are very well received as an endorsement. Exceptional educational backgrounds and good commercial track record. Blue chip clients, also very important. But as far as resource deployment goes, as I've said, it can be very labor intensive in at least the first year. But as you've hired your team and got into the market, your job gets less, typically speaking, with a good reporting system. But an ability to dedicate substantial time in the 3-month process, give or take, it takes to get the grant applications and initial commercial customer engagement going, and then arguably between the senior management team on rotation, 6 to 9 months of time cumulatively in that first year, and then it reduces.
Okay, brilliant.
I would also like to add, because I missed one of Christian's questions, for as little as £2,000 commitment in R&B equivalent, you can typically get your company registered, something that we take care of. All of that rigmarole, which is a minefield for foreigners who don't know China. Your banking, your legals, your commercial licensing, your visas, all of that can be done with typically £2,000 until you trigger your first tranche. Now, if you win a 4 million grant, you don't get it all in one go. It goes 30, 40, 30. You get 30% once the company's registered and your lead applicant, typically a founder or CEO, comes to sign the contract and do a signing ceremony. That releases the first 30%. The second 40% is typically released on the KPI of hiring a certain number of people. At 4 million, that's typically 7. And then the third tranche of 30% is typically released on achieving certain revenue and tax targets. And it's not a fight. The government's KPI with these grants is to get you in, to stimulate you and make sure you succeed. So the KPIs are not hard. They're typically extremely reasonable, and any company that is truly dedicated to coming in should match them fairly quickly, within 18 months to trigger 100% of those grants. But we would hope that if you do indeed need to raise finance, that you'd raise finance basically in parallel with the second tranche.
Brilliant, thank you, Jake. There was a question that came up in the chat, and I just want to highlight that just in case any other people have missed that, but it's around can 8 hours assist with academic to academic collaboration, innovation in ag tech and access in Chinese research funding. So if you just want to cover that so everyone else in the call hears about that as well.
William?
Yeah, no, happy to take that. Yeah, we have a sort of 360-degree spectrum of partners, and a lot of the technologies that we work with are deep technology, and so our partners in China and obviously partners internationally are very interested in research. So it's definitely something that we do assist with, but it benefits the companies that we're working with. So yeah, very happy to connect with any institutions that are looking to do things with China.
Well, one thing I might add, Annabelle, is that we have a lot of the techs we work with are spin-outs of various universities across Europe, and those techs that have spun out of universities are particularly the government for grant programs.
Yeah, it's essential to in the context of these projects, if you've got new technology that may need to conform with certain standards in China, or even you're trying to lobby to set new standards that would actually give your technology a leg up, to collaborate with certain academic institutions or research institutes that have the right standing before the relevant ministry, so that you can actually get the acknowledgement that you need to really get visibility and the sort of market support for the technology that would allow large-scale deployment.
Thank you. Just following on from that, so there's a question that's come in around what due diligence resources are available to help companies navigate and understand the ways in which the landscape is more foreigner friendly. Jake, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that as well if you want. I think a good place to start, although we can all poke fun out of the World Bank for various things. I think the index that they produce on doing business in China is actually quite a good starting point. It indexes across various areas, including, for instance, regulation. That's one area in which China's score has improved over the most recent years. So it gives you a kind of, I think, a broad sense of where the improvements have been made and maybe where more focus needs to be given in terms of there being a greater challenge. That's one sort of simple way to do it. And otherwise, sometimes it can be a struggle to find resources that I think truly understand what's going on. I think actually conversations with the likes of Peter on the line are much more useful in a way. So people who have their finger on the pulse and actually understand the up-to-date situation. And also, it obviously very much dependent on the sector you're in, what type of technology you're in, etc., etc.
Annabelle, yeah, we can of course provide case studies, thorough introductions into really deep dive introductions into how it works, why the governments and the grants are foreigner friendly, what their KPIs are, what they're trying to build, and why they need foreigners and foreign technology, where the gaps are. Personal case studies or case studies outside of the 8 Hours Network, legals from the likes of Peter, and of course the British government, Ray's end, and the British ecosystem like the British Chamber CBBC can also provide great help in performing diligence.
Great. Ray, sorry.
To clarify, we don't do due diligence. It's the one thing that the government won't do because we're not qualified to do it, but we can put companies in touch with legal companies or consultancy companies who can do it.
Thank you everyone for that. Ray, just want to highlight as well, we've got Dennis at Envirolyzer in the asking a question, just would like to connect with you as well. So that's another opportunity to connect with those as well. Well, it is actually 11 a.m. now, so we will be closing the webinar, but I just would like to say that, you know, it's been really, really fantastic. Great to see so much activity in the chat, and also those questions that have come through with those contact details. So we will be making those introductions and following up and ensuring that you do get the relevant information that you need, and working with 8 Hours Ahead and doing so as well. So thank you to 8 Hours Ahead. Thank you to Peter. Thank you to Ray. Thank you to as well Don, who spoke earlier. It's been and Shamal as well. It's been a really great session, and we do hope that you follow up and look to entering the market and landing and growing in China. So thank you all, and this recording will be available, and those email addresses are in the chat as well for you to take those conversations forward. So thank you all.
Thanks so much, Annabelle. Thanks to everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.